Dr. Belal Hasan, assistant professor in our nutrition and food science on the food science and technology, is going to be speaking with us. And then he's going to be providing a great engaging presentation. So I'm really excited to have him round out the conference. Thank you everyone for sticking around as we wrap up. And don't remember, you will get lunch afterwards and some time with our sponsors. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Hasan.
Thank you so much, and oh boy, 11 speakers, all with such experience. I don't know what I'm doing here, so I just give a conclusion, or should I share something? Luckily, I had some time to change my slides or modify them. And I'm sorry, I need a minute because I've been changing hats from organizer to office boy and now researcher back to my original goal. And I will be talking a little bit about developing next generation. And I think it will touch base on everything that has been discussed in the last 2 days. And we talked about meat analogues. I'll tell you the journey where I started from Asia, moving to University of Minnesota, and now in Cal Poly Pomona, and what is the goal of my research. So meat alternatives, meat substitute, analogues, fake meat, plant-based, vegetarian, vegan meats are all different names used in different sources for one thing that describe a meat-like products, whether in their nutritional value, which is the protein, or their texture. And the majority of the focus was on the protein. And that's simple because we made of a protein technically, and we could live with any deficiency longer time, but not with the protein. Protein deficiency is very critical. And historically consumed for several reasons. And religion, availability, of course, on top of everything. And religion, for example, the Hinduism, Buddhism, during the Lent of Orthodox Christian. And I brought this example because a lot of people do not know that falafel, the very famous Middle Eastern, were developed by the Coptic, which is the earliest Egyptian Christian who did the Lent, and they needed to find a delicious food that has a lot of protein to support their diet. And of course, certain diseases and allergies to meat products. We have good examples. We have tofu and seitan in China, among the oldest. I think they are documented even 2,000 years ago. Started in China, but I think we all agree now tofu can serve in any cultural food. And I will cover in a few slides why we consider it a very international food that fits all cuisines. We have other examples like tempeh from Indonesia. We have falafel, which is the chickpeas patties from Middle East. We have kachori from India. And I brought one example because in India, during my travel, I learned so much about plant-based. If I put the examples, I think I need about a couple of hours just to name the plant-based protein sources. And black beans, of course, that's a modern thing, and those are good examples. Some pictures for you, just if you don't know, tempeh, that was AI generated. I know, does not look very delicious. Sorry about it, it's last minute. But this tofu is something we did in Cal Poly not Cal Poly Pomona, and I had the chance to talk to the chef and learn more about how they prepare it, and I took a picture. This is my own picture, some of the falafel and the seitan. So those are some of the examples. We are in Kellogg West, and a lot of people do not know that Kellogg, which is under a lot of criticism nowadays, John Harvey Kellogg was the first American scientist who realized how important soy in the American diet, or in the diet generally. And I think he started his research in early 1912, but in 1930, there were thousands of meat-based steak sold in the United States. And unfortunately, a lot of consumers think it's a very new thing. It's not. Protos was sold in the US market since 1928, and is made by soy. Smart idea. They use honey, they use some nut butter and malted nut, which is replacement for almond. And this is, I found some advertisement from Battle Creek, and is a vegetable steak advertisement from, I think, 1959. I couldn't find any earlier, but this is good example that plant-based is nothing new. It's really a mission for almost everyone who is concerned about healthy communities. Underutilized, a lot of underutilized that we don't know about, which is sourdough bread. It is rich in protein. Idli is another thing, is a rice with lentil, beautiful. Buzul from Africa, some Eastern African countries, is a corn-based, fermented. Doenjang, and my Korean friend taught me how to pronounce it correctly. It's not doenjang, there's no O. So doenjang is a soy base. And we have injera, which is made of teff and is very famous in Ethiopia, Eritrea. And those, unfortunately, not very well known. The problem with all this classical plant-based meat or meat alternatives, the texture. All of them does not resemble texture. And the problem with us as a human, we used to that mastication, that texture, especially, I think, since the history, which is 10,000 years ago. We see all the pictures from old Egypt or Babylon. Somebody's hunting a deer or killing a sheep or something. We see a little bit wheat for beer, not for meat analogues. But we mostly kill animals, eat them. So we need that type of texture. And those alternatives do not offer that texture. So that's the new technology. All the new technology, the purpose is to make a better texture. Sure, we can improve the flavors, we can improve a lot of other things, but to me, texture is number one. If you don't have the right mastication, the right bite, it tastes good, but it's not meat. And I think the most important technology is extrusion. If I ever have the chance to leave Earth and go into space, I'll take extruder. Yeah, that's the only thing I need to survive. Ingredients, I can find it out, and I'm biased. I'm putting there a small toy. It's just a Thermo Fisher 11 millimeter. That's what I own, and these people are my partners, so that's what I have. But we have one of the largest producer of extruders, food-grade extruders in the world, which is Bueller, since 1860. They are here with us exhibiting. You can talk to them more about the sizes and the commercial work that they do. Then we have the shear cell technology, which is developed in Netherlands, in Wageningen University. Is a good, but is a batch base. It's not gonna fly like extrusion. Extrusion is really much more advanced. And the third one is the 3D printers, which I mentioned yesterday, and one of my panelists was talking about. It's not gonna be commercial, but it's gonna be future, they say, toy in your house, because you will be in your self-driving car asking your personal robot to print some food for you. And I will share with you a sentence for the future. If you have kids or you're planning to have kids, you print it, you eat it. Period. You take the menu, choose the food, print it, and go home. By the time you reach there, don't complain. You choose the picture. You print it, you eat it. So I promise you, we will show you the future. So extrusion cooking, again, is becoming the mainstream. Is a large scale commercialization. Again, Bueller can tell you amazing stories. I learned from them that they can go up to 4,000, 5,000 kilograms, and that's 2.2 pounds. Just if you want to do the calculations, that's a lot of pounds per hour. People do not realize that we can make a high density protein in the same amount of food. I can double or triple the amount of a protein in the same amount of food. It depends on my raw material. Because I could use anything between 40% protein up to 90%. It's a very complex. My panelist yesterday mentioned we do not understand it. We use it, but we do not understand it. I mean, just like a lot of things in our life, we okay, we can use it, but we don't really understand what is happening in the extrusion. The two things that are very common is a low moisture, high moisture, and that's what we really know, and we control these by the water amount and some of the processing conditions. So the main difference between low moisture and high moisture, we use high temperatures for low moisture, less water content. And for the high moisture, which is HME or high moisture extrudate, we produce fibers. It's just like meat structure. However, I got 3 undergraduate students, collected 100 samples from the market, and they did analysis on if they used TVPs or the low moisture or high moisture, and we found 85%, exactly 85% using TVPs. It's still the most common in the market, and I can tell you this one is more challenging, stability and shelf life. Compared to TVP, you can leave it at room temperature for months or years, actually. So it's more economical, made of soy, and historically we know how to produce it. Again, comes to adaptation. TVP is very simple to produce, not from pea protein though, from soy, but HME is very challenging. This is our new book for Elsevier that will be published soon. And we're partnering with one of companies. I don't like to share the name, but you can ask me after we're done. And we just showed that those meat analogs in the market made of 50-60% water. You don't see it on the label because you don't want to pay us $10 for something made of 60% water. 20-30% is TVPs, which is dry, low moisture. We use a lot of structure builders, binders, flavors, antioxidants, and you can see all this. Could be natural, could be artificial, is not a big issue. The big issue is, in my Angus patties, I only find Angus meat. In my plant-based patty, I find 40 different ingredients. With 10, I don't even know how to pronounce. Not only me, I mean, even if you are native English speaker, you still cannot pronounce them, which means something unexpected. What the industry does now, and most of us, looks like meat, smells like meat, tastes like meat, but is not meat. Make no sense at all. We should educate our consumers. We should bring the consumers with us to the journey, not to develop something that looks like meat, smells like meat, tastes like meat, but is not meat. I mean, I always give to my student an example. I could look like Justin Bieber, but I need a lot of money. Don't laugh. I could go to Thailand, I come back, and I will be taller, but I could look like Justin Bieber, but I need a lot of money. And that's take us to the cost. Angus beef, 10 pounds, and based on the cheapest products, the most sellable, the most affordable for US consumers, $39 per 10 pounds, $63 per 10 pounds, and $29 for tofu. And that's explain why tofu is still way more acceptable. It's not only the cost, don't misunderstand me, it's the cost, but the utility. We can use it, as I mentioned, is not a product of, as a Chinese cuisine. No, it's international cuisine, because I can make tofu Mexican, Indian, Middle Eastern, doesn't matter. I flavor it, and it's affordable. The only thing there is the texture. I mean, it's not a meat. But to me, tofu is already a novel product. So the question here, it's 1 million? I thought I put 1 billion. Sorry, I only know 2 million. That's my goal in life. I don't want to go to billions. So do we want to engineer consumers to adapt and fit the technology? Or do we want to engineer the technology to fit the consumer's demands and needs? What do we want? I want this. Because to me, human comfort is number one. I associate food with culture, identity, comfort. It's not something I consume and I go home. A study, unfortunately, I did not get to share in this slide. I made other slides which I got mixed up. 87% of inmates in jails complained about food. That's the most dangerous place on earth. You could be killed any minute, and people complain about food because food are associated with your comfort. I remember when I was 16 or almost 17, I break up with my first girlfriend. I needed a lot of ice cream and chocolate. I don't want to eat vegetables when I'm in pain. I need something that makes me happy. And that's a human. I always bring example. How many of you, please raise up your hand, if you would like to celebrate your birthday with a vegetable? And that's amazing. Like, we're human. We don't agree on anything. But when it comes to birthday, I traveled the world, all the way from Finland to South Africa, from China to the US. All of us celebrate birthdays with cake. There's one thing on earth that we all agree on. It's not vegetable. But sorry, we are human. So that's the question. Should we engineer ourselves to accept technology, or should we engineer technology? Should we stop eating cakes or make healthier cakes? The world is not about patties. So, big population. Food industry is driven by the plant-based meat is driven by Western diet, mostly fast food diet. I think my colleague Christopher already mentioned that, majority is a Western diet. And even the people who volunteers is mostly on high income Western people. I want to choose my words very carefully. The manufacturers use dozens of ingredients, and that's the cost. The cost and the criticism, because they come back to you and say, you have 45 compounds in there. Why? Always we hear, oh, we reached the ceiling. You can find it in a lot of journals, articles. Have we really reached the ceiling? Ceiling of who? Of a Western diet consumers. Can we have more inclusive solutions? Yes, but we have to tailor products that fits cultures and needs, especially when it comes to cooking styles. So for 2 years, me and my advisor in UMN, we worked really hard to understand the system before we talk about developing new products. And one of the biggest achievements or novel findings is systematically we studied all the conditions, what actually affects the texture. So we got the extrusion, we studied all the temperatures, all the screw speed and whatsoever. I don't want to take you to technical terms, but that's a lot of technical work. Second we did is introducing the rheological properties of plant-based dough mixtures and how that affects the quality. And that's why we are on a mission now to develop a rheology testing center. Because everything is connected from the powders that you use, through the dough that you make, the process, and the final product. We did develop a method, different scales, especially when introducing some of the techniques that never been used, like microcompounder. And that can give us inline data about the rheological properties, what is happening to the viscosity, if I increase the time, reduce, and was very useful because it helps engineers to design better extruders. We did study systematically the effects of pH. We got some products, about 15 products that time. Oh, I remember, I did not get reimbursed. Okay, but 3 years ago. Anyway, we got about 15 products, we checked the pH, and as a food scientist, I'll check the pH, because pH, the main effects or the influence on the protein, and we found like, oh, it's all over the place, and we got in contact with those manufacturers, and we asked them, do you consider the pH? They were like, no, we're just making recipes. I was like, oh, okay. That's something for us. And we designed an experiment. We did a pH from 3 to 9, and we understand now how the pH affects on the extruded material. We established that the water is the driver of texture. We studied the ion strength. Again, we use water. It could be hard, soft. There's sodiums, calciums, other minerals. It affects your protein. We try to understand the effects of ingredients. You keep adding all these emulsions, condiments. How does that affect on your proteins? And this is important. Again, I was lucky to be a part of a research group that is led by a material scientist, but I'm a food scientist. So when we combine observations with deep thinking, That's when we come up with interdisciplinary, holistic solutions, because we are thinking in different directions. I'm thinking about the consumer and the food, and my colleague thinking about the material properties and physical properties. We establish a method that we are so proud of to quantify the texturization. We establish a method, not the method. So there's no single solution. It's part of the solution, but as a simple technique is adopted now by the food industry based on swelling behavior. You take meat analogues, drop it in water overnight, measure some of the dimensions, and pretty much it. Again, 60 years people do this experiment. Nobody observed that there's a changes. One of those Saturdays, I texted my advisor and, oh, those samples are growing. And he was like, are you sure they are dead? It's just protein. It was like, yeah, do something about it. Some calculations, and that night he was like, I think we are into something. And that's how interdisciplinary research work. Oh my God. Okay. We studied the protein aging. Protein age. You put them in the chiller, they age, they become bad. Freezer, crystals, ice crystals, they damage. Just like us, we age because we are made of a protein. Plant-based proteins, they age. The texture change. And that's the first study published. Again, interdisciplinary research. I'm not the smart person, it's my advisor, but I'm the person who was willing to sleep in the lab for 4 days, taking readings every 2 hours. I mean, not much to do outside in Minnesota. It's like January, but yeah, I stayed in the lab. I'm sorry, no offense for Minnesotans. So what we did is a face mapping. We did the expertise, the technical expertise. So now we know our system. When you know your system, now you can do a lot of things because you understand what is happening. You face mapped all the behaviors and all the variables. And that takes us back to my question to my advisor. Arrived to O'Hare, 2 days later, I drove to Minnesota, and my first meeting after another 2 days was, I am from Asia, I'm ambassador of Asia, why all the meat analogues is just burgers? What about us? We're like 4 billion people living in the other side of the world. And the question was like, let's do the technical work, understand the system. Before I left, we did the last work, which is my first question on the first meeting. What about other cultures? And of course, we choose stewing because it's a bit challenging, but it's also common with so many cultures. So in stewing, we need to boil samples. And we already understand the water is the driver. So we extruded sample and different water. We boiled them, and we found out like, okay, 1 hour, 2 hours is suitable. We understand their behavior for first time. You're cooking, you use garlic, you use salt, vinegar, sure. So we needed to understand how they respond because they are man-made proteins. It's not cow-made, it's not sheep-made, it's man-made. So we needed to know the behavior. And we found out that salt should be added to the end of the process. We learned that vinegar makes the texture very hard. We learned that the garlic make it soft, and oils and fat, don't add them because they will break down the structure. And there's a lot of technical understanding behind it. I don't want to confuse you with all the information. So we decided to cook with it. Can we reproduce cultural food using meat analogues, changing one item, which is just the meat. Take out the meat, use meat analogues, and my colleague, he traveled to Central America a lot, so he chose feijoada, and his first job was in a French restaurant, so he decided to do beef bourguignon and feijoada. I did mafi, I did rendang, and another Middle East plate, and we just like, yes, it's reproducible, nice texture. The flavors, you don't care about the flavors because this is very spicy. You can tell the difference. If you put there tofu, it's just the texture. But it's really too spicy, that's an Asian dish, you will not know what type of meat you are eating. And that's the beauty of Asian food. You don't know what you're eating. It's just spicy. No offense, I'm Asian. So we continue the research. We did commercial samples. We did dozens of them. I just share one because that's the only one was successful. The other all failed. So at least they cannot sue me because I'm saying it was usable. The others all failed. And we did some other cultural foods. And that takes us to something very important, the interdisciplinary research. With my colleague, Julie Lee from agribusiness. She's agribusiness economist. I don't even know what does that mean, but you give her data, she calculates, and she have crazy equations that she tells you, that's your consumer price. I don't want to know how. I just know that if I produce something like this, vacuum packed, give it to the consumer, that's the cost. Consumer cost. It's not, again, she's available, she's at the back there. You can ask her how she did that. I gave her all the information, like ingredient cost and the wattage and the capital investment whatsoever, and she did like 3 years or something like this. And yeah, I give you this, you take it home, you cook it the way you want, just like you buy your meat. I don't add any flavors. You cannot criticize me. Pea and water, that's it. What do you want to criticize me for? I didn't add anything. I just gave you texture. It's a tofu, but with a better bite. It could be soy, but now we use pea. I don't know why, but we are shifting toward pea. It's just, I think, the country policy. We're moving to pea, and there's a huge demand for it. Not allergens. I mean, we don't know if there is allergens. We don't have clinical studies, but I'm sure in the future we will see, oh, the Big Ten, peas in there. But interdisciplinary research. How is my time? I don't. 7? Oh, great. Everyone going top, bottom. We decided to go bottom, top. Simple. Food. Who wants food? People. Can they talk? Sure. They talk different languages. Thank you so much for Emily for reminding me the languages. We have amazing diversity of students. So we got funded from SIRG, internal fund in Cal Poly. And we trained students who speak different languages, and we send them out to communities. Go do surveys and focus groups. Understand what the consumers want. And what they did first, they increased the awareness, because we found, step one, a lot of the communities didn't even know what is meat analogues. It's like, what? I eat beans, but, oh, I eat tofu, but it's not meat analogues, it's something else. They didn't even know what's the concept. So we realized that we developed small program in different languages to communicate with communities, explain to them before we take them to the survey and the focus group, because that's fair. We need to educate you before we take the feedback. Then we take their feedback. As Prafi mentioned earlier, it has to be tasty, sure. It has to be affordable. It has to be healthy. I care about my son or my grandfather. We will not know this information until we talk to the communities and get their feedback. And what we do with the feedback, we pass it to the food industry, and we tell them there is opportunity to make millions of dollars, but you need to tap those topics. That's what the consumers want, is not the 40 compounds in your patty. They want something to make taco or stewing. And one of the, I'm not sharing a lot, but one of the participants told us, if I take patties on Christmas, my grandma will kick me forever. It's like, that's not my culture. I'm sorry. I support plant-based, but I cannot bring it home because not my culture. Future. We are developing or designing healing, wholesome meals. Healing is not to heal you, but to keep you healthy. That's how I see healing. That's how I see medicinal food. Food that can keep you healthy. Second, we're doing clinical studies with my great colleague, Bonnie Whitmores. We're working toward designing clinical studies. We want to understand more between fully processed, minimally processed, if only protein, if soy, what will happen. Third, schools and early age adaptation, which is very important. Kids in Asia, they eat natto. Any of you know what is natto? It's sticky, smelly. Kids in Asia, especially in Japan, they finish like 200 grams in 50 seconds. I took it one time to my son's school just to share with them. I think 3 of them didn't show up the second day, and 7 complained to their families. It's like, adaptation, they don't know what is this. And they were like, what this bad socks smell? Like, okay. So I'm working with my colleagues, Fatima and Colleen, toward early education and adaptation. As Rafi mentioned, we give you an option and we observe. Maybe the meat consumption reduction is there, but with adaptation, without telling you, but we offer you options that affordable, tasty, that you will be demanding and asking for. Last thing, with my great colleague, David Edens, he's our chef. We would like to train chefs. That's why I'm trying to get him to find time to get him into the research, trying to write a book, because we learned it's a new behavior. You bring Chef Ramsey, no, I should not use names. I bring Chef A, and he's really good in doing anything. But give him meat analogues, ask him to reproduce it with the same ingredients, he will fail because it's a new behavior, he's not used to it. That's why we are trying to write a book and with all the guidelines, how to cook meat analogues in cultural foods. And that's not me, it's just AI. I just said Middle East chef trainer, and that's what I got. So AI thinks all Middle East are bald, but so, okay, no problem. And I'll skip the videos. I mean, it's just showing you how the things is made. Powder, that's meat analogues, and that's how we use it. I maybe just this one. Just this one. So, just powders with some water, and that's what you get. This is meat analogues with a better texture than tofu. That's the point. Doesn't taste like amazing. Take it home. Do it the way you want. You want to make taco of it? Sure. Make a deep fry, stir fry, is up to you. I'm just preparing something healthy with high density of protein. It's your responsibility to cook it. I'll skip the conclusion because I would like to thank the funders. I have a slide, but unfortunately this is the wrong slides. We received 5 internal funds from Cal Poly Pomona, and we received 4 external, especially from Agriculture Research Institute, ARI, and we got 1 big from US Dry Pulses, and recently we are in negotiation with USDA HSI because we are Hispanic Serving Institutes. I would like to thank my students, Abe, Camille, and Fariha, my first group here, which you have seen their posters. They invested a lot of hours, especially when we installed the new extruder. Thank you so much. I know you getting paid less than $16 per hour, but I'm working on it. Great work they did. At least 12 hours a day during the breaks. And I would like to thank my SRG team, which is Dennis, Julie, they are from communication, journalism, agribusiness, and my 5 students, Andrea, Andrew, Kevin, and Marlene Suvani. And yeah, thank you so much. I will be more than happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Wow, was that bad?
Can I ask you a really, I'm coming from nutrition. I don't want to say it's a stupid question because no questions are stupid. But so really all you're putting in, how is that extruder different than just a pasta maker?
Very good question. In one of the slides, I showed you that extruder combined modern twin screw extruders is a heat process. Pasta is a cold process, and the difference, you denature the protein. You're creating a new texture. It's not only pushing a material through, it's actually you unfold or denature the protein, and you build up a new texture. It's like a gel system. That's how you get a texture looks like a meat.
Hi, Belal.
Yes.
Over here, this corner. Hi. You mentioned that you've got LME and HME, extrusion of the meat, or the meat analog. Obviously, HME is a lot more difficult to produce. Which would you say is the kind of the industry's leaning towards, LME or HME?
I love your British accent. I didn't get the question. Simplify for me.
Okay, so you've got your low moisture extrusion and your high moisture extrusion. Obviously.
It's LME. Okay.
Yeah. So
okay.
So the low moisture gives you that longer shelf life than over the high moisture. So what would be the which way is the industry leading towards? Is it low moisture or high moisture?
Amazing question. The industry, because of the long history, they're still leaning toward the low moisture. Few reasons. First is made of soy. Second is a shelf stable. You can produce it in a larger quantities. You don't need water, and those who work in food industry, water is a mess. More water, more mess. Less water, less mess. And the cost, of course, especially of soy, from that study that we did, the 100 samples, 85 samples were made of TVPs. Almost 90% were soy-based. So soy still for 1 pound is about $2 compared to pea protein, which is $5. Give and take. So I think the industry is still toward the low moisture, but we see some shifting toward high moisture is slowly building up because there is no demand. If you make a high moisture, which is texture, then you grind it and make it burger, make no sense. But if you introduce the next generation that the people need a whole cut meat, then the industry will start to shift to HME. But at the current situation, make no sense. You take it, you grind it, make it a patties or sausage or whatsoever. So there is no demand for it, less demand for the HME. But as I mentioned, the cultural needs and the new next generation of meats, we could push toward that. We will have shorter shelf life, but we also have other options. Think of meat. Meat, even if frozen, shelf life is 2-3 months. So why should we want something that's shelf stable in the freezer for 2 years? Do you buy it and keep it 2 years? It's like some consumers is it 2 years shelf life? It's like, do you keep your food 2 years? My kids keep it 24 hours. Yes, Darren.
The first presenter this morning talked about the change in the participants with the twins study, their change in their perception and their behaviors over time. I'm wondering, do you ever think about surveying your students before they start with you, and then down the road, has their perception of a lot of these foods and a lot of these diets, have they changed?
You just gave us a master's thesis.
That's really good question. Again, I'm so lucky because I have interdisciplinary team. The first thing we did to develop that type of surveys. So we started with our own students. We see how that changes them, with knowledge. But the same service goes to the communities that we engage with. So that was the first thing. We want to measure this. And thanks to USDA HSI, we attended a couple of conferences. I'm traveling in 4 days. Is it 4 days? Julie, 4 days we going? Yeah, 4 days, 5 days we going to Arizona. The last conference, they are helping us to understand how to measure the impact. And the surveys and getting the information validation was the big thing that we learned. So that's where we started most of our projects. Yes, sir.
Yeah. The extrusion changes the shape of the protein particles or no?
Oh, yeah.
If it does, then did you do study for digestibility? Because it does affect the shape of the particle.
Thank you so much. Again, if I had extruder 200 years ago, they will call me the best magician on earth. Creating life. Drop powders and create meat, fibers. Yes, you change everything. A lot of studies out there. I'm trying, but I'm now on the technical side, slowly moving to the culture. And with my nutrition colleague, which I have 9 colleagues who are in the nutrition, We are going toward this, but of course, funding and you need to build up toward this. Of course, digestibility and accessibility of the protein. What happens? Do you get less, more? But we need more knowledge to build up, and of course, funding, and it takes time. But don't worry, I'm here for the next 20 years. I have no plans to leave LA, unless I get a job in San Diego. That's a different story. But
So we actually have a few more questions, folks. We are at time, but I did see that lunch, they're a little slow on getting it up. So I'm going to keep, there is box lunch for everybody, okay? But they didn't look like they were completely finished. So we have just 3 more questions, and we want to announce our winners of the poster session.
Hi there. So pea protein, is that a complete protein? The pea, yes, it's incomplete only because of the cysteine and methionine? Or it's just
you
coming
see,
from it, yeah.
that's the thing. They gave me 40 minutes, or I gave me, or the committee, we gave me 40 minutes.
Yeah.
That's one of the things in Prof. Yoping lab back in Minnesota. We consider when we start to combine proteins and build up nutritional profile. First, we understand the single proteins.
Right.
Then we start to combine. And for the last 4 years, all this work just for pea protein is not easy. It's a technology, it's a materials, plus the variety. You get pea protein A, B, C, D. They give you totally different, same processing condition, give you totally different results. So we're trying to face mapping, and that's where I stop in here, because yes, we did further, we analyzed further, but he's looking at me, he's like, don't expose, it's not published yet, but we want to understand the behavior of the material as a material. That's why we use non-traditional techniques like the micro-compounder, because in line we want to see what happened. Nutritionally is important, but nutrition people should think of the food processing people. It's not easy, it's very difficult. We cannot just shift and add another protein. It's a lot of mess and a lot of expertise before we can get some nice quality.
Yeah, thank you, Belal. The demand side of this is so important. Did you go back into the community and try your extruded protein with the communities that you had been interacting with?
Did I give you this question? Because that's our USDA HSI is about. We did the first, and we shared the initial data that the communities need us, and we building on that we need funding, larger funding, so we can invite those communities, especially the decision maker in the house, and share with them, ask them, we cook it, and you give us the feedback. Would you consider that? And we are lucky because we have something called the Pumpkin Festival, which we have about 200, 300,000 people visiting us. So we're planning to have, is it how long? How many, Dr. Davidov? I mean, it was like 200,000, yeah. So yeah, and we can tell you why. I mean, we are located in 12 to 14 million people population. So we have plans, and that's the future. We will engage them in what we are producing and building on that. Is that what you meant by taste, affordability? Validate their feedback from the surveys.
Right, excellent. Looking forward to seeing that.
Right, and we have our last question here.
Hi, Dr. Hasan. I'd like to, first of all, thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate the emphasis on meeting communities and providing them a food that actually matches what they eat rather than yet another patty, yet another ground beef-esque product. That was really interesting to me. My question was partially answered by the previous question in terms of what opportunities are you looking for outreach and actually presenting these products to consumers directly. But I'd like to focus in on you mentioned schools as an opportunity for early adaptation, having institutional food service pick up these products and kids try them out and like them, and then present that to their parents. Are there any plans to trial that at schools, or would that be like a demo, or would there be any interest in doing full-scale, like school or district-wide semester-long experiments?
Thank you. Great question. That's what we're planning, is to have an access to at least one school where we introduce plant-based diet for at least 2 to 3 years and observe what Rafi was talking about. would the kids adopt? Would we see reduction in the meat demand? And that's what we are aiming for, the adoption, is we introduce it, it's not compulsory, it's not mandatory, it's there as an option. You try it. If it meets your needs, your taste requirement, your texture requirement, you will start to adapt into this, and slowly we see a reduction. And this kind of data, we need it. Because now our school program foods is another story. There's not much of plant-based. And I think that's a key point to start from there. Of course, we can do some advertisements, we can add some characters, some, a lot of things. I mean, I can't discuss with you, Alex. You are in our department. I would love to have you as a research student.
Great question. School systems are very hard to infiltrate, but perhaps we can start with Cal Poly's daycare, right? Or, I mean, they're always looking for help on the nutrition side, and they have a little more freedom and liberty to do what they want with their food serving. All right, well, everyone, I want to thank you and thank Dr. Hasan. You should say, yeah.